Welcome to the NatSci Chronicles, the official podcast for the College of Natural Science at Michigan State University. My name is Jesse Early. I am the Director of Digital Media for the college and the host for this podcast. The NatSci Chronicles is a podcast dedicated to keeping you up to date on all the latest happenings in the world of NatSci. In this episode, I'll actually be taking on the role of interviewee as Interim Assistant Dean for DEI and Director of Academic Advising and Student Success for the college, Daniel Flores Lopez, will be conducting an interview with Stephen Thomas, Casey Henley, and myself. Today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and we'll be discussing the subject of digital accessibility and the work that the college has done in this space. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast.
Hello, I'm Danielle Flores Lopez, she, her pronouns, Interim Assistant Dean of DEI and Director of Academic Advising and Student Success for NatSci. Today, we're talking about accessibility, and more specifically, digital accessibility. Accessibility, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is a process by which something is easily used or accessed by people with disabilities. However, this only paints half the picture. In reality, when something is made more accessible, it becomes easier to use and more inclusive for everyone. To talk about this topic today, I am joined by MSU College of Natural Science Director of Digital Media, Jesse Early, Digital Accessibility Coordinator, Casey Henley, and Assistant Dean for STEM Teaching and Learning, Stephen Thomas. Welcome, everyone. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background with digital accessibility? When did you first take an interest in it?
So I can go. I'm actually relatively new to my current role in the College of NatSci accessibility team this semester. But I've been working with accessibility in the classroom for probably about 7 years now. And that's when I first started teaching online and designing some online certificate programs for the neuroscience program here at MSU. And so in addition to that, I've also been a College of NatSci web liaison, or accessibility liaison, and I've co-facilitated a learning community focused on accessibility in the classroom.
I'll just jump in there because I feel like we all tie into this in various stages, but I feel like I've worked with this since 2015, so about 7 years now. And it was really started off basically focused on how to make my own course more accessible. And then as the university became more interested in making sure that all experiences were accessible, I started helping faculty in similar ways that Casey is doing now with learning communities and giving workshops to faculty about how to think about accessibility and how to actually do it.
And it's kind of funny. It sounds like we've all been working with accessibility for about 7 years. That mine goes back to 2015 as well. At that time, I was working at another university, and the administration web accessibility was high on their list. There was either a single person or a group of people that was going around suing universities because some of their content wasn't accessible. So it became a high priority for the administration at that time. So I went to a conference back in 2015, and they had an all-day workshop on web accessibility. So I was able to bring that back to the university, and my team and I were able to implement kind of web accessibility across the board for both the university websites as well as our internal applications. So when I started working here with the College of Natural Science in 2016, I was able to bring that experience with me. And one of my primary responsibilities in my role currently is the management and maintenance of our web content management system. We've got about 93 websites or so within the college. So, ensuring that all that content is accessible is definitely a high priority.
Thank you. What does it mean when we say the College of Natural Science is committed to being digitally accessible? And what type of work or planning does that involve?
I guess for me, when it comes to the web, because that's kind of where my primary focus is, in terms of planning, it's ensuring that the website templates, for example, are accessible. So I manage and maintain that as well. Of the 93 sites that we've got, they're all kind of housed within the same system. So it's easy to develop a website template and theme and design that is accessible from the ground up. And I've done that a couple of times now. We've gone through a couple of different iterations of that. So the planning, I guess, of that is, kind of building that from the ground up with the accessible things in mind. And then it's also ensuring that the content that's published is accessible. Um, like I said, we've got about 93 websites, but we've got over 300 content editors across the college. And that's, they range anywhere from students, faculty, staff, administrative assistants. So the kind of the knowledge there is kind of all across the board. So it's getting the training kind of in their hands and getting them trained and understanding what web accessibility is to ensure that the content they're pushing out is accessible as well, right? Because I can make the template as accessible as possible, but if your content's still not accessible, we're only halfway there. So.
And I think from the academic side of things, which is where I'm coming from, being digitally accessible is about removing barriers that might exist within our courses. And that could be within course structure, the course materials. But it's this idea that there's something there that could, at worst, prevent some students from succeeding at all, or maybe a little bit less obvious is that it might cause some students more work or a higher cognitive load to essentially reach the same goals as other students. And so one of my roles is to help faculty think about and address these issues. And so we have an incredible group of accessibility liaisons, all from different departments in the college. And so we're able to use these liaisons to improve instructor awareness about accessibility issues and help share resources to the faculty as well.
If I could just tack on to Casey's piece, I think the added challenge about accessible classrooms and courses is also helping faculty to think about how they're actually teaching the material. So it's not just about how do you translate materials to be more accessible, but it's also what is your process in the classroom that might promote more people engaging in your course. And when we talk about disabilities and who we're trying to help with this, it typically breaks down into 5 disability types. So sight, hearing, mobility, cognitive, and psychiatric disabilities.
Thank you. It's wonderful to hear about all of that work. Can each of you talk a little bit about the nature of your involvement with digital accessibility and the colleges and what the goals of your work are or were?
So my role is to first help our instructors meet like the basic accessibility needs of their students. And we can do this by supporting liaisons and providing access to resources for the faculty. But I also think it's really important to begin conversations around expanding how we view accessibility and starting to see it really as a component of DEI. And that making our courses accessible from the beginning can help all students and not just those with documented accommodation needs.
Yeah, I think
so. Just go ahead, Jesse.
Okay, sorry. I think with me from the website, it's ensuring that, like I said, the template is accessible, our content's accessible, but it's also trying to get that training, trying to get the content editors to understand that accessibility isn't something you need to tack on. You need to be thinking about it kind of, as you're creating content. One of the biggest challenges, I think, is people want to present content on their website in these really fancy, flashy ways, which is great because it brings a lot of engagement to your content. But in doing so, right, in presenting that content in certain ways is not always accessible. So we sometimes have to take a step back and say, okay, well, what are you trying to do with your content? And then they sometimes have to work with me to kind of try to figure out how to best present that content so that it's still engaging, but is also still accessible, essentially for everybody, not just people who are using screen readers.
And I would just add, sometimes the nature of the work is actually in making connections across campus. So the upper administration doesn't necessarily know what the faculty need in order to make this work happen. And so having discussions about what are the challenges that we're currently facing and what are potential solutions. So some of that work is helping to communicate up that one of the things we're wrestling with is how to make equations that are typically as a solid picture. How do you make those accessible so that a screen reader will read those aloud for a sight impaired student? And so having that conversation up and then having admin be like, oh, well, we can get this software that will help to alleviate that issue. So a lot of the work is about communicating across unit to get consensus about like what our challenges are or how people are figuring out to meet those challenges. And then how do we communicate that up to administration to make sure that we're all understanding the direction we're going and how we can get there.
Thank you. And Stephen, I think you started to touch on this. What are some of the challenges that exist for digital accessibility, and how are your involvements addressing those challenges?
Well, I'll go ahead and so I did mention technology. So some of my work is helping faculty to think about their teaching with regards to technology. And I think that there's an inherent challenge between trying to do more innovative teaching approaches and accessibility, because you have to think more broadly when you get to the accessibility piece of like, how will a variety of people engage with this experience that I'm crafting? And when you're doing a new technology, you're wrestling with like, how do I use this? And so the idea of how do you balance those two things, I think is a very difficult challenge. And so at the same time that we're trying to progress how we engage with the technology and the content, we also have to think about how do we make that more accessible and how do we make sure that everyone is getting access and having a worthwhile experience with it.
Yeah, I think piggybacking on that from the website of things, right? Speaking of technology, the web changes so fast. There's always new technologies that people are like, oh, can we use this on our site? And I'm like, well, maybe, but I got to figure out how to make it accessible so that you can use it. So I think that's one of my biggest challenges. And then one of the other challenges I think is pretty big, which I touched on previously, is essentially just training. We've got 300 plus content editors. Not all of them have experience with web accessibility. So I've done like online training sessions through Zoom, through Teams. In the past, it's even been, going to their office, sitting down with them one-on-one at their computer. Sometimes they still don't get it. So in those instances, I just have to make the corrections for them on their sites. But it's a real challenge to kind of get the training and the mindset in place to be able to make your web content accessible.
Yeah, and I would second essentially what Jesse just said, is kind of time and staffing along with that, right? Making sure we have enough people to help the faculty and that the faculty have the knowledge that they need and the time that they need to put into their classes and make them accessible. But one thing I think that's really important when we think about classroom accessibility is that the more we design our classes with accessibility in mind from the onset, so before, instead of remediating, then less time is needed when you do have students who come into your classroom with a visa, because your class has already been designed to support those students and support all the students. I think another challenge too is still simply general awareness. And I feel like there's still a view that academic accessibility is only in the online space, right? Is only in the online courses space. But the pandemic has really changed how we teach in face-to-face classes too. And so now accessibility is becoming a bigger topic there as we start to look at the amount of digital content that faculty are putting up on D2L or using web tools as well in their classes.
Thank you. And we've heard the term visa mentioned a few times in this session. Would somebody be able to explain what that is?
So a visa is, I'm not going to be able to remember what the acronym stands for, so maybe someone could Google it as I talk. But a visa is a document from our Resource Center for Persons with Disability, which is a center that students can go to when they need disability accommodations. So students who might need extra time or might have mobility issues, any of the 5 disabilities that Stephen mentioned earlier in the podcast, they can register with RCPD, and then RCPD, along with their medical support, will determine what types of accommodations they need in class. And then these students can bring the visa to faculty during the semester, and the faculty can then adjust the course as needed to meet these accommodations for the students. It's a really great
It's a,
resource for students. Sorry, what's that?
it's a verified, individualized um, services and accommodations document.
And I will add,
VISA.
there's
Yeah.
also a VISTA, which is for temporary accommodations as well. So if a student breaks their arm and they can no longer take written tests or something along those lines, the temporary, there's a temporary accommodations as well for students. So if students are not aware of RCPD, they should become aware of it.
The Resource Center for Persons with Disabilities.
Yes.
And also that is available for faculty and staff as well. So accessibility is not just for students, it's how do we actually create the entire environment, right, that would help all individuals in the system.
Thank you for sharing that. What do you believe has been the biggest moment in digital accessibility for NatSci, and why do you feel that way about it?
I can speak from the website, although I can't narrow it down to a single point. I think there's really three things that stand out. So I'll just touch on them briefly. I think the first is getting all of the college websites. So that's, departments, programs, we've got lab sites inside of one web template. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I built that template from the ground up with accessibility in mind. So I know the template is accessible. It's really just kind of ensuring that the content is accessible to kind of help with that. So that was number one. To kind of help with that, number two is we also had developed an internal tool to be able to scan your content. It's an automated scanner, so it checks your content against the WCAG, which stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, against that rule set. Within the university, we only have to meet level AA, so that's what it scans against. But it will essentially identify for content editors any sort of issues or errors that they have within their content. Now that's an automated scanner. Automated scanning is good, but it's not the gold standard. You should also test it by hand. But it is a tool that we have out there for our content editors, which is something we didn't have before, and I don't believe that any other college within the university has for their CMSs. And then I would say the third thing is the development of an accessibility toolbar. So on every page within the college websites, if you hold the Alt, Shift, and A button on your keyboard, or if you're on a mobile device, you can actually see the little accessibility icon in the corner. That will bring up the accessibility toolbar, and there's a vast array of different tools on there for people to use. So like you can make the website grayscale, you can highlight links, you can turn on dyslexia friendly font, things like that. So I think those are the three that I can think of. But yeah, sorry, I couldn't narrow down to one.
Having three is great, right? I mean, yeah. The more the better. For me, I would say that the introduction of the Accessibility Liaison Network a few years ago by Stephen was really innovative. I believe we're one of the few colleges that has this real network of individuals that are ready and willing to participate in academic accessibility discussions and then share key takeaways and conversations and resources with their home departments. It makes having a broader impact on accessibility throughout the entire college much easier to have this network of people helping.
For me, it was actually an attitudinal shift, both for faculty in general, but also the people who were trying to promote accessibility. So I feel like when we first started, and technically, the university really did try and start this in 2009, but Jesse was right. It really was this kind of grouping of lawsuits that really got the university to maybe to pay more attention to it. And I think that kind of set the frame for us thinking about accessibility as with regards to compliance and checking boxes for like, have we done this? Yes. Instead, to me, like the turning moment that was really important for NatSci and the university in general is thinking about how accessibility is not, I mean, it does have elements of compliance, but that's really not the lens that resonates with people about why you should be doing accessibility. And so once we actually realized that accessibility is about expanding your reach to people, And there's a huge element of social justice in it as well, of how do we have experiences that everyone can partake in. And coming from being at a land grant institution, I think that just really resonated with people, that this is not just some unfunded mandate that's coming down from administration. This is actually the work that we value and that we want to do. And so to me, like, that was the moment that that really kind of helped to cement that as part of our practice.
Thank you. All of this work is so important, and thank you for all of your contributions. What kind of results do you hope to see over the next 3 to 5 years, and how can they be implemented?
I kind of want to piggyback on what Stephen just said there. So I think for me, I would love to see this continuous progress of recognizing accessibility as an equity issue that can benefit, a wide range of students. And so when we see accessibility through this lens and we design our courses, giving the same consideration that we would to the content or the assessments, we're really making our classes more inclusive to all, and that's great. So I'd like to see more faculty learning about and implementing maybe pedagogy frameworks like Universal Design for Learning. And the way we can do that, again, I just keep promoting our liaison network, is through sharing resources through the network, and then making sure these conversations about accessibility are happening in pedagogy spaces. I'm going to do a little promotion here. I've actually submitted a proposal for a learning community about equity in the classroom, and accessibility is going to be an important conversation that we have in that community. And so I'm hoping next year to be able to promote it to NatSci faculty and the liaison network and bring in folks to keep having these conversations.
For me, I think it's just continued training and education to our content editors for the web. I think we've been doing a good job at it, but I think we could do a little bit better job at providing some more detailed information when it comes to web accessibility. So the content editors have a resource to actually go to other than just me, because currently it's just me answering questions for 300 plus content editors. So I think providing a resource for them that they can refer back to, before reaching out to me to kind of help answer some of their questions, I think would be advantageous.
And coming from the academic side, I would actually just echo Casey's vision. I think that's actually really robust and interesting. So I'm looking forward to those next 3 to 5 years that Casey will be leading that on the academic side.
Thank you. Is there anything else you would like to let people know about that hasn't been mentioned here today?
Yeah, I think from the academic side, I haven't really talked too much about technology. And so there are a lot of tools that are built into the technology that we can use in the classroom. And they're very similar to the content checker that Jesse kind of described for the websites. There are built-in accessibility checkers in all of the Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint that we have access to. Again, they're not perfect, but they do something. MSU has recently integrated Spartan Ally into the D2L. So you might have noticed the little bars on all of your content. And that's again, an automatic checker looking at accessibility in our courses. So it kind of gives you a very visual information about how your course is doing accessibility wise in D2L. And then we also have, Stephen mentioned it briefly, Equasio is a math tool to make equations. It's so robust. It's absolutely amazing. And so you can make all of your math equations accessible using Equasio. And so we have all of these resources available to us. And there's training at the university through Web Access, the digital accessibility team, and through the library. So there's lots out there for helping everyone figure out and meet accessibility needs in the classroom.
Yeah, I would say if you're curious about what we're doing from the website, on every page on the site, regardless of whether it's the college site or department or program, there's a site accessibility link in the footer. So if you go ahead and click on that, there's all sorts of information about what we're doing for accessibility from the website. So if you're interested in the accessibility toolbar I talked about, there's information on that, kind of all the features that it offers. It talks about, skipping navigation on our site, visual design, colors, and things like that, and essentially everything that we've been doing and continue to do for accessibility on the web.
The only thing I would add is, we talk about accessibility, and I feel like people maybe have in their mind that that's for someone else. And just wanted to point out, even when we talk about captioning videos, so having closed captions where words are printed on the screen at the same time they're being said, that's an accessibility thing. And yet research has shown that 74% of students use captioning. And it's not that 74% of students are hard of hearing, but there are lots of reasons why you might use closed captioning. You might be in a checkout line and you're watching a video, or you might be on public transportation, or you might have a child, or there are lots of reasons. And there are ways that we talk about it sometimes, like disabilities. You might have a permanent disability where you only have one arm. You might have a temporary disability where you broke your arm. And you might have a situational disability where you might have to hold a child while you're trying to navigate. And so whenever we're doing accessibility, any person can fall into the needs of that accessibility at any time. And so really the work that we're doing is work about making sure that everyone, regardless of their situational elements, can engage with content. And that is, I think, it's a really cool thing. So that's why everyone should be interested in this topic.
Absolutely. In closing, if anyone would like to learn more about digital accessibility as it pertains to the college, what are the best resources to direct them to?
So I got here in 2016, like I said previously. Stephen, could you maybe mention, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. could you maybe touch on the 5-year accessibility plan that we've done? I don't know how exactly that came to be. I know I've been involved with it since I've been here, but I just don't know exactly how that came to be.
So the 5-year accessibility plan was a centrally prompted tool to help units think about their trajectory for accessibility. And so each unit was asked to create a 5-year plan for how they're going to be meeting accessibility needs. And then each year we generate a report of what have we done, what have we learned. Honestly, we've learned a lot, so that, when you created that 5-year plan after year 1, you were like, oh, actually, that was unrealistic to think that we would have all syllabi accessible by the end of the first year, or that's even
Right.
something that's desirable. It's really been something that's been directed and something that's evolved over time. And so I don't know if that is a resource that people can publicly plug into, but other resources that are available.
I would say if people,
yeah.
Well, I'm going to promote our liaison network again. So any instructor in their departments teaching classes can reach out to their department's accessibility liaison. And the list of liaisons is on the webaccess.msu.edu website. And so you can see who your academic accessibility liaison is. Anyone can also reach out to me in my role here. And then mentioning the web access site, there are lots of tutorials and trainings and resources on there about how to learn about accessibility and make things accessible. And if you want to learn more about the Spartan Ally I was telling you about, there's a whole Spartan Ally page. And then the library also has a LibGuide all about accessibility as well. And so they have a number of resources there that can help individuals as well. And if you want to become a liaison, please let me know.
Always looking for more of those.
Yes.
For For the 5-year plan, I believe that is accessible for the college on the web access site. If anyone's curious at looking at that, I think I jumped the gun on mentioning the link for the in the footer, but that's also there if you want to view that. And we also have it's more of a training website, but there is information on accessibility on it. It's called web.natsci.msu.edu. That's going to be undergoing a lot of changes here in the near future, but there will be accessibility information on that as well.
I will just add, if you're a faculty member, we do have some hard-baked trainings on accessibility through, I'm blanking on the company name, but we have them.
Oh, DQ.
DQ,
yes,
yeah.
right. That's not 2 letters. That's actually spelled out DEQUE.
Yes.
Okay, so if you search for that on the MSU website, you will come into those trainings.
Thank you. And that will wrap up our interview. I would like to thank all of you for joining me on this episode of the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.